Hello, music theory students. This is a video about creating a diatonic sequence in 4/4 meter, a step-by-step guide. This is based on the Horton and Ritchie textbook, Harmony Through Melody. And for those of you doing, I'm assuming you're watching this video because you're going to be doing this assignment, 21.3, compose a sequence in B minor and 4/4 meter based on the descending natural succession and closing on a cadence, or closing in a cadence. The example I'm showing here on the screen is composing a sequence in G minor and 4/4 meter based on the deceptive resolution sequence. So remember, your baseline is going to be different, and the way that your sequence repeats will be different from this example in what I'm showing you on the screen and what you'll be doing. But the basic ideas of how to deal with the rhythm and the meter is really what this focuses on. You already should know before you start this assignment how to create your framework. Okay, I'll be talking a bit about that framework every now and again. So because this is a deceptive resolution sequence, we start by creating our baseline. And in this case, a deceptive resolution sequence, remember, our whole notes move down by thirds. Okay. All right, that would be my the first step. I will show you more in a second. Because you're doing, if you're watching this because you're going to be doing the descending natural succession, remember your whole notes move down by step. Okay, going from 1 down to 5. Okay, so just to clear that up before we begin. Now I'm going to continuously be talking about the deceptive resolution sequence. Well, actually not really talking about it, but showing how it works in 4/4 meter. It works the same way for our descending natural succession. Okay, so you start with the blank page, just like this. We always start on the tonic. So this one's in G minor. I just showed you how to do that in G minor. The one you're doing on is B minor. So you just need that first note to start on the root of the tonic triad, or on B. Okay, if you're in B, G, if you're in G. Okay, so like I said, the first step is to create that whole note framework. So 4 whole notes. In the deceptive resolution sequence, we're moving down by thirds. Descending natural succession, we're moving down by seconds. And in the ascending 5/6, you're moving up by seconds. Okay, so we first start by notating the bass in whole notes. Then we decorate this bass. We have 2 options for decorating. We can either decorate with a root position triad or 7th chord. In this case, it's going to be a skip step. Okay, if you are doing your descending natural succession, that of course is an extended double skip, right? But in this case, it's a skip step. And then once you've chosen what you're going to do, you choose it in the first pattern and you always repeat it. Then you do the soprano. You elaborate this, or you put the soprano first starting with whole notes on the strong beats, and the strong beats in tenths, octaves, or compound fifths. That just makes sure that you have a tonic triad and then a triad on each of the following measures that match the sequence pattern. Okay, once you have the soprano outlined, you join with the bass and you create a 3-note figure. In this case, we've done a broken chord. You make sure what you put on that weak beat, the elaborating beat, is in fact a chord tone, right? So make sure you know what your chord is, the triad or the 7th chord that you have on the weak beat, okay, in whatever sequence you're using. Okay, so make sure that it is a chord tone. Okay, the next step, once you have this, we now need to consider the meter. Okay, so the nice thing about 4/4 meter is even how we've done the framework, the rhythm is going to match exactly, right? So we've just elaborated in half notes. Okay, so that means that we can just put that exactly up. So we put in our measures. So when you're first setting up your framework, you want to make sure you have, especially with 4/4 meter, you make sure you have a lot of space. I would take your full sheet, divide it into 5, and get that, make sure that you have enough space, because there is a lot of decorating in this 4/4 meter one. Okay, so make sure you have lots of space. So here it's now all set up in half notes. I've just moved what was in my framework now to that grand staff in the middle, and from now on we're just going to be working on this middle staff. Notice I'm keeping my analysis down at the bottom. That can just stay there. we're going to keep our Roman numerals at the bottom. We'll put our figured bass right under the line that we're working on, but we'll keep our overarching Roman numerals at the very bottom of this 4-stave system. Okay, so once you have that meter and your bar lines drawn, move to the next step. Now in 4/4 meter, it's a bit harder to decorate our half notes. We'd be decorating in quarters and eighth notes if we were going to follow our different ways of decorating. It's good. It would be a really good idea, or your best bet is to now decorate each half note into quarter notes. And this, the example on the screen shows you the basics that you can do. You can just create 2 quarter notes out of that half note with repetition. So this is just repeating each one of those notes. But of course you could do a broken chord figure as long as you're leaping to a chord tone here. So this whole measure is going to be a G, B, D. So you could have leapt down to the B flat and then up to the F for the next chord, which is D, F, A, and potentially C. Right? So just make sure that whatever you're doing on the weak beat here matches that first chord, and whatever you're doing on the weak beat here matches the second chord. Once you've elaborated that first measure, then you just repeat it exactly for the next 2 statements of the sequence. Okay, once you've done that, you can now do the real elaboration using your instrumental figures. Okay, so here it means that you're decorating each beat with 3-note vocal figures in spondaic and trochaic. So we don't have any of those because these are all 4-note and 5-note melodic figures. But you could do it into 8th notes. Let me move this down a bit so you can see. You can also decorate 4-note figures in dactylic and anapestic. There are 2 dactylic examples here. Both of them are 4-note prime embellishments. Okay, and then your 5-note instrumental figures, we have 2 of those. We have a polyphonic melody, remember that? Okay, where we're leaping to a chord tone, but there's passing in the other, in the sort of the upper voice of the polyphonic melody, and then the lower voice is on those 2 Gs, which is a chord tone, right? This is a G, B flat, D chord. Okay, and then our second 5-note figure here is passing. Try a bunch of different options before, remembering that you always need to leap to a chord tone and you step in passing generally to a dissonance note, okay? Once you have the measure that you like that works to the downbeat here, you simply take that and you repeat it at the new pitch levels, and that is dependent on the diatonic sequence that you've chosen. In this case, it's a descending deceptive resolution sequence. So now see, my first measure has been repeated exactly, but a third lower, and then again exactly at a third lower from there. Okay, so now you have your full soprano line of the sequence completed, but not quite to the cadence yet. Okay, once you have your soprano of the sequence done, then we go to the bass. Here we decorate the bass. So because we're in 4/4 meter, we have a lot of different options here. So first, we've leapt to a chord tone. Okay, so now we've gone from a root position G chord to a first inversion G chord, and then we've done through passing, we've passed up to the root position of our D chord, and then that's just been repeated. So just in our trochaic rhythm, okay? And so again, we're using the same rhythms that you've learned about before. Okay, so trochaic rhythm. And then once you like what you have here, don't forget about putting your figures in there if you have leapt to a first inversion chord, and your bass has to follow all our harmonic rules now. We can only have a root position and first inversion chord for both this chord and for your weak beat chord as well. Okay, but once you have once you really like your bass, you just repeat it exactly to your cadence, to the beginning of your cadence. Okay. Next, we add the inner voices. Remember, our inner voices just realize the harmony. Decorate them only when you need to. It's fine. Look at our tenor is simply moving in half notes all the way down. It didn't need to move. It was fulfilling. It was fulfilling the third of the chord here, the fifth of the chord here, third, fifth, right? Because our soprano is moving around so much, our alto needs to make sure we don't have any kind of voice overlap. So it's getting out of the way for that nice soprano leaping line. And then it has a half note again. So once you figure out what you can do in that first measure and it works, making sure there's no parallel fifths or parallel octaves over the bar line, you repeat that exactly at the new pitch level 2 more times. So all 3 statements are the same, but at different pitch levels, okay? Okay, now we can get to the cadence. Now that you have your sequence done, you can get to your cadence. So first, we need to plan out your cadence. So with the deceptive resolution sequence, we end with a 2 chord, which is a precadential dominant. So then we want our dominant chord to be on the half of the measure, so on beat 3, and that gets held for two beats, and then we have our final tonic here. Because your option to do this in 4/4 meter based on the descending natural succession sequence, you actually have 1 less measure. Because you actually end on the 5 here, it means you can end on the 1 on the weak beat here. Because that's still considered a strong enough beat to hold a final cadence. So you would have your 5 chord here and your 1 chord here, and you wouldn't need this final one. So here's an example of this from the textbook. Hopefully I can hold this up to you so you can see. So I'm looking down here. That's how you would frame your harmonic cadence in the descending natural succession sequence. Okay, now if you decide to hold that 5 chord for the whole measure, I will accept that as well too. That's another possibility. It's just the 5 then just gets held for a little bit too long, but it still can work. Just make sure the soprano works really well. So once you've framed your harmony, so you know how your harmony is going to move, we can now do the decoration in the soprano and the bass to keep the momentum going, but also to prepare for our cadence. So here, again, it's not the same. We've now moved away from our repeating patterns, but it follows a lot of the basically the rhythmic feel for the piece has been preserved. Now we can do some more decoration in the bass. So we've moved up to the third of the 2 chord, and we've turned that into a 2/7 and a 2/6/5. And then what you really want to do is this idiomatic 5/5 descending octave leap in spondaic rhythm. So in this case, it's going to be 2 quarter notes in the 4/4 meter. And the soprano kind of keeps some of the same shape going up and then moving into that final cadence, making sure you raise scale degree 7 if you're in a minor key to make sure we have a proper tonicizing chord from our 5 to our 1. Okay? We have to make sure that we have that 7/8/2/1 here to make sure that we resolve properly. Okay, so that's now our cadence is pretty much done besides our inner voices. So final step, add your inner voices at the cadence, making sure that you have all the notes that you need. For some reason, I have a funny, ignore this, this should just be a sharp here. So we have D, F sharp, A. Oh no, we have the C there and we have the C here. So we have a 7 sharp both in both places. So the figure bass is a little messy there. Okay, so this is the complete diatonic sequence in 4/4 meter, and we can listen to this as to end this video. Okay, and that's how you create a diatonic sequence in 4/4 meter.